Hey, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. And 10 years ago today, after having been a college graduate for less than a week, I drove more than 3,000 miles on a whim to see a local MySpace band play their last show together in Dallas, Texas, with two buddies of mine. It may not have been the most responsible thing for a broke kid to do, but in all honesty, what it gave me was worth more than all the money in the world. Okay, let's get into today's episode.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast with Raymond Hatfield, the podcast dedicated to interviewing world-class photographers to ask them the questions you want answered. Whether you want to be the world's best wedding photographer, family photographer, pet photographer, or you just want to take better photos of your kids growing up, we will get you to start taking better photos today. Here with you as always, husband, father, home brewer, LA Dodger fan, and award-winning Indianapolis wedding photographer, Raymond Hatfield.
Welcome back to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I am Raymond, as always, your host, Indianapolis wedding photographer. I'm a lover of life. I feel rejuvenated these past few weeks, and let me tell you why. That's what this whole episode is going to be about today. I just did something that has kind of been on my bucket list for a long time recently, and I'm excited to share my thoughts and experiences with you. But first, I want to give a quick shout out. Okay, we got a new iTunes review. Check this out. This is good, short, sweet, to the point. I love this one. It is from Chan953. Chan, if you're listening, thank you so much for this. He says, or they say, I'm not sure. Great podcast for photographers, not just for beginners. The interviews are great and very informative. Thank you. Actually, that has nothing to do with me, so I don't know why I'm taking the credit for that. If you are trying to start to run a photography business, you should give it a listen. Thanks. So yeah, that's one of the things that I didn't think that I'd really be diving into too much when I first started this podcast. Was I kind of wanted to stay away from the business side of things, but you know. If you're trying to run a photography business, you need to know about photography, and I think we talk about a lot of the things that aren't technically related. We don't really talk a lot about settings or gear. So yeah, I'm glad that you are picking up little bits of information that help you start or run your photography business. So right on. That's it. If you could do me the biggest, if you're listening right now and you are enjoying this podcast, if you could just do me one favor, I would be the most appreciative podcast host in the world. And that would be, if you haven't already, we've been getting a lot of reviews lately, and I'm so excited. If you could just leave the podcast a review, an honest review. If it's not 5 stars, tell me that it's not 5 stars and tell me why. I'm always up for improvement, but it really does help out the podcast. So thank you so much for taking the time to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and get into today's episode. So if you are in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, you will know that last week I left. I took off on a big airplane all the way to Alaska. And Alaska is a place that I've been before growing up. I have family there, so I traveled to Juneau several times, probably, 3 or 4 times growing up, but I have not been back to Juneau, Alaska, since, it legitimately has probably been 20 years, to tell you the truth. I think the last time I went, I was 10. I was not very old, maybe 12. I don't know. Regardless. Anyway, I got the opportunity to photograph my cousin's wedding. Who still lives in Juneau, Alaska. So she reached out to me sometime last year and said, Raymond, I've been following your work and I love it, and I'm engaged now and I want you to shoot my wedding. So I was like, game on. Yes, this is exciting. I was so excited. So of course I was honored that she would ask me, and then just the thought of shooting a wedding in Alaska just got me so excited. Being in all these photography groups, you see photographers who shoot weddings in the Pacific Northwest and these beautiful locations and mountainous and lots of beautiful trees, that it is just, at least coming, from the good old Midwest, as much as I love it, lacks a bit when it comes to the scenery side of things. So having this opportunity really, really, really excited me. So I wanted to treat her as any other bride that I would have, right? There's no point in treating a friend or family member as if, like, oh, well, they're a friend or a family member, they'll understand if I don't get to X, Y, or Z. I don't. I guess I don't really have like I try not to do that anyway. So that's one thing that I really didn't want to do, and especially because throughout my workflows as a photographer, I keep in contact with the bride. I ask the bride questions leading up, in the time leading up to their wedding, because I want to get as much information as possible to let me be prepared. So I knew that there were going to be a few things different about this wedding than there are just about every wedding that I shoot here locally. For one, the biggest thing is I'm going to have to travel. So that was going to be my first major hurdle. But overall, I want to share these 7 things that I learned about shooting my first destination Alaskan wedding. Okay, so the first thing is really trying to stress the importance of being prepared. Okay, so for me, that is scouting out locations. Okay, and scouting out locations was very tough for me for several reasons. One, you're just not familiar with a location, so therefore you don't know where all the good spots are to photograph people, right? And a lot of times, at least for my style of photography, I don't want to take the same photos that every other photographer has taken, so I try to always mix it up and do something a little bit different. And I think that I went a little overboard here because I felt like I couldn't show up and shoot the same photos that they have seen by every other, photographer who lives there locally. They both said that in the past 2 years, they've been in I think half a dozen weddings. So they kind of knew where all the spots were to take good photos, right? And when I heard that, I thought, well, this is kind of where I guess that ego check comes in, right? Because part of it is like, well, personally, I don't want to go to all the same locations that all the other photographers go to, but because that's not what I would do traditionally here in the Midwest, right? I understand that it's a beautiful location, but if there's nothing unique that I can get from it, then I don't want to go there. But here's the big but. Okay? The thing is that you, as the photographer, are already under a lot of pressure to deliver, right? A lot of stress. So if you're scouting out locations and you pick one that doesn't work, then you're going to be under the gun, right? So you don't know because you don't live there locally. And what happened to me was that I found a location that I thought was going to be great, and luckily I arrived a few days early, and I found that getting to that location was actually under construction, and we wouldn't have been able to make it. So that is where you need to take a step back and not try to reinvent the wheel as much as maybe you would if you live locally. Because even though there have been other photographers who have shot in that location, you haven't, right? So just approach it with your eyes, your fresh eyes, and come at it as if you were shooting this location, right? Because that's ultimately what you need to do. You have a style of photography, even if you don't recognize it yet, but it all comes to your eyes and how you see the scene in front of you. So therefore, there should be no problem with you being able to capture it in your own unique style. So that was it. It did help, however. So if you're going to a location that isn't as, not that Juneau is remote per se compared to a lot of the rest of Alaska, but it's technically an island. It's small. I think it's only 42 miles. So my point being is that there may not be as many options in a location like that as there would be, say, a larger city, right? Portland, or Seattle, LA, Chicago, whatever it is. So when you're scouting locations, one thing I like to do is I just like to use Google Maps, right? So one thing I might start and just search for Juneau, Alaska weddings, and then just see where some of these weddings are being photographed, try to figure it out from the context, see, just to get an idea, right? Just to get a very basic idea of what photos in a particular location are going to look like. And then I use Google Maps to use like Street View and try to look around and see if I can find anything interesting. And then if you find anything interesting, it really helps to know like where the the wedding is, or where the getting ready location is, so that you have an idea of how far away you should be looking, because you don't want to be looking 45 miles away. Depending on the timeline, that may not always work out. So there you go. Step 1, scout locations. That is my number 1 tip. That is because it's all about being prepared. And if you have an idea of where you want to go, then that's going to help. And again, if not, you can always ask the couple if they have any preferred locations. That always helps. Okay. Number 2. Okay, this one was very hard for me, and I couldn't do it. It was, don't pack everything you own. Yeah. So this one's tough, right? Because you got all this cool gear and you're going to Alaska, which is kind of like, I don't want to say once in a lifetime, but it's not an everyday opportunity for you. So you have this idea like, oh God, I got to bring the GoPro. I got to bring my film camera. I got to bring, the specialized lenses. You got to do all this stuff. I got to bring the drone. I got to bring everything that I own that's related to photography, just in case, so that I can capture everything perfectly. The entire feeling of the wedding day, and it's going to be amazing. But what it translates into is you walking through an airport with a roller bag and 2 messenger bags and a backpack full of stuff, right? Because you brought everything that you own. And that, for one, is not fun. For 2, it's tough to keep, not keep up, but be aware of where all of your stuff is, right? So when it comes to all of your gear, a lot of times when you go to a new location, it's hard getting from one place to another, and when you add lots of gear on top of that, it doesn't make it easy. Okay, so what am I trying to say here? You're still doing a job that you've done before. You know what I mean? So don't, I guess, just don't try to reinvent the wheel again, right? I can't remember the last time I shot film at a wedding. And yet here I was bringing my film camera and like extra rolls of film just in case. But like, who am I kidding? Who am I kidding? It's stressful enough to shoot a wedding. Now you're in a new location, and you also got to keep track of extra gear that you don't typically bring. It's just too much stress. Don't worry about it. Try to keep it as bare bones as possible, and maybe bring like one fun thing. Like if I could go back in time and do it over, I would probably, even though I didn't use it, I probably just would have brought my GoPro. I wouldn't have brought, the drone, which actually ended up not working. I did take it out, and I don't know why it didn't work, but it actually freaked out and started flying away because it said that the compass wasn't working and that there was no GPS signal. So it was a mess. And it was over water. The drone was over water. I was freaking out, but luckily I got it. I would not recommend. I'm going to have to upload that video. I'm going to get the video out of my drone and then upload it because it was terrifying. So if you want to check it out, I will post that in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group Thursday of this week. So if you're not part of the group, feel free to join. Search Facebook, Beginner Photography Podcast, and you'll see my accident. Actually, I don't know how well. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll upload it. Okay, so what I would recommend is just try to fit as much as you can in like a single messenger bag. Even if it's a big messenger bag, try to fit everything into one messenger bag. So I have a... to tell you the truth, I actually don't know what version bag it is. I have several messenger bags, and the one that I brought was very large. It's made to accommodate even like a 15-inch laptop, right? Like it's a large messenger bag. It's too big for a regular wedding for me. But I wish that I just would have packed that with both cameras, only 2 lenses, right? I brought the 70-200, but honestly, I only needed it for the ceremony. I should have just left that thing in the car. Or not even bring it. It was actually a very intimate wedding. I could have just got closer. But these are things that you don't know. So this is where that dichotomy comes in. It's like, well, do I bring it just in case, or do I not bring it and then just have to deal with it? And in my case, I would say don't bring it and then just deal with it, because ultimately you're still there. You're still going to capture the wedding day, even if it's not technically perfect with your gear. You're still going to be able to shoot it. So, okay, that was tip number 2. Don't pack everything you own. Okay, tip number 3 is get a timeline before the wedding with addresses. Doesn't seem hard, right? It's something that I ask all of my brides traditionally for anyway, and that's that, right? But for some reason, I was because it was my cousin's wedding. I went there a few days before, 3 days before, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay, 4 days before. Okay, 4 days before the wedding, and I knew that I was going to be seeing family before the wedding, so I thought it's okay. I will get it from my aunt beforehand. I'll get all the locations and addresses ahead of time. Well, unfortunately, once I got there, I always show up to a wedding day on the wedding day, so I rarely ever see the week before stress that everybody has. And as far as the timeline went, there was large gaps of time that I wish I would have known about before, so that I could have helped kind of optimize the flow of the day and just help things move more efficiently. Because with those large blocks of time came, just kind of sitting around, I suppose, and not being fully utilized. And that's not their fault. That's not the couple's fault. I should have, with my experience, I should have been able to look at a timeline, really hammered it out, like nailed that down before showing up, and then filled in those gaps. Because when you know a timeline, again, it's going to sound like I'm beating a dead horse here, but you don't know what you're going to encounter, especially in a new location. So since you're in a new location, that's all new. You have extra gear, that's all new, right? All these things are going through your brain. The last thing that you should be thinking about and wondering and questioning yourself on is the timeline. You should know that thing front to back. And if something goes wrong, that's okay. That's fine. If something goes 15 minutes over, 15 minutes under, an hour, whatever, that's fine. At least you still have an idea of the flow of the wedding day. One place where this really helps out a lot is the reception. If the bride can't give me a breakdown of what's happening at the reception before the wedding, the first thing I will do when I get to the wedding is I will talk to the DJ and be like, hey, what's the rundown? Because I need to know, do I have 5 minutes before cutting the cake? Do I have 25 minutes before cutting the cake? Are people doing toasts during dinner or after dinner? Because all of these things affect what I'm doing, right? Oftentimes now, for some reason, it's a big trend, which I should really educate my couples on, as it's not a good idea, is they will walk into the reception, they will do their big entrance, and then they will go straight into the cake cutting. This leaves me approximately 0 time to photograph the cake uncut, right? So that these are things that is very nice to know. And when you know the timeline like the back of your hand, it just makes the day, it's one less thing that you have to worry about, and it makes the day run much, much, much smoother. Okay. So I just talked about, that was tip number 3. I just talked about getting timelines with addresses. Addresses are very, very, very important for a few reasons. One, if it's a location, so this location for the wedding was actually at a ski resort, which was beautiful, by the way. So one thing that I did was I simply searched Google for this ski resort wedding so that I could see samples of images of weddings shot there, with the location. So one thing that Google Maps did is that Google Maps pulls up like a CG type, what's the word? Topographical, I guess, map, I suppose. So it looked like I could actually see downtown Juneau from the ski resort, which would have been incredible, right? To get that downtown view at the ski resort. Oh my gosh, I was so excited about that. Unfortunately, when I showed up, there are the ski resort is I don't know, vertical feet, probably 700 vertical feet from the top of the ridge line. So therefore, you couldn't see over the ridge line to see downtown Juneau, Alaska. There was a mountain in the way, essentially. But according to Google Maps and its computer generated feature, it looked like you could see it. So that was one of the problems. But I guess that goes back to scouting locations. So let me get back on tip number 4, which is with tip number 4 is find the best light. And yes, you can do this before your wedding. So as I talked about, get the addresses. So one app that I like to use several apps on my phone. Now this is on iOS, so I'm not sure about Android, but I'm sure that there are equivalents. There's one app called Sol, S-O-L, and I use this thing every time I go to an engagement session or anything. And what it does is it shows you a like a little map of where you are. And if you're watching this on YouTube, let's see if you can see this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can like scroll throughout this timeline, and it will tell you like what kind of light it is. So today I know that golden hour starts at 7:54, and then sunset is officially at, is at 8:59, and then civil dusk lasts from then until 9:30, and then it's nautical dusk, and then astronomical dusk, and then it's full darkness. So this is great because it knows my location on a map, and you can enter in a new location if you want to. So from there, you can get an idea of about what time light is going to be good in the sky. And that makes it kind of hard because of mountains and whatnot. But if you know the address of the location, you can get an idea of which direction you're shooting so that you'll know where the sun is. As well as, let's see, there's another app here called... it's called Golden Hour, okay? And this app actually costs a little bit of money. I don't really remember how much it costs, but the great thing about this is, one, there's an Apple Watch app. So, on a wedding day, I don't like to pull out my phone at all, or as little as possible. So having access to information on my watch is wonderful. But also the great thing, which actually you can't do on the watch, but that's okay, is that there's a map on in the app. So you can get an idea. You can just enter in the location, and you can see like, okay, so the sun's setting from this direction to that direction. So in my case, I would have been able to see, so the sunset isn't until 9 p.m. or whatever, but it's going to go down over the mountain at 7:42. So now I know that even though sunset or golden hour isn't until later, I still have to be out there earlier to be able to get that sun peeking through the clouds. And that is really important, especially if you are if you rely heavily on natural light when it comes to portraits, is knowing not only where the light is going to be, but when you're not going to have any more of it left. So that is a great tip for that. Okay, that was tip number 4. Find the best light, with golden hour. So again, there's several apps for that. Okay, number 5. Tip number 5 is to rent a car. Okay, so destination weddings, right? Sounds great, sounds glamorous, sounds wonderful. You travel all over the world. You shoot these amazing weddings, but a lot of times you forget about transportation, right? And transportation can be, we got the cheapest car and it was $100 a day. Okay, so we were there for, let's just say conservatively, you're only there for 3 days. The day before, the day of, and then the day after, okay, before you got to take it back to the airport. That's $300 additional dollars that you're going to have to spend on a car just to be able to drive you around. But I think that it is a necessity. And I had family there who rented we rented one big Dodge Durango, fits 1,000 people in the back, and then my aunt and uncle had a combined 4 cars. So there was going to be no shortage of cars, but on the wedding day, guess what? Somebody's got to go back and forth. Somebody forgot their shoes. They got to leave. Somebody is always loading up the truck with things to bring up to the ski resort. If you're shooting a family wedding, I would still rent a car, because having that peace of mind, so in the morning I have to go photograph the guys, but you still gotta drive things up to the ski resort to be able to decorate and stuff. So I need a car. Having that car is going to give you that peace of mind once again to be able to confidently capture something and not have to worry about transportation, essentially. And I think that spending that extra money is totally worth it, and you can just build it into your cost of the wedding day. So, okay, I feel like that one's just kind of like common sense, but I get it. It's hard to spend that money, right? It's hard to be, whoa, that's $300 that I gotta spend just for a car when you should be able to get around just fine. But even non-family weddings, I can tell you I've been to plenty of weddings to where everybody got to one location, but for some reason they accumulate things. The dresses got to fit in the car, they got to fit whatever, and suddenly they don't have all of the room as they did before to drive to the next location. So you may be able to get to one location, but once it's there, it may be hard to leave. And as a photographer, you just cannot have that happen. But I have had happen is I've rented a car before, and is it the groomsman? The groomsman, maybe it was an usher. I don't remember. Okay. Anyway, they had to get in the car with me to be able to drive to the next location for the exact same reason. They got there just fine, but once everything got filled up, then oh no, it was a cousin. It was okay. So yeah, it was a groomsman. Okay, they couldn't get to the next location, and I said, hey, don't worry about it. I got a car. You can just hop in with me. We'll be okay. All right. So you might even save the day. And for $300, you're gonna have to make that call, but I think it's worth it every time. Number 6, the iPad cannot replace a computer yet for photographers. Now so last year, just over a year ago, actually, I just got the notification that I've had this computer for an entire year. I switched from a MacBook Pro to an iMac. So, because I found that I don't shoot destination weddings, so I bought myself an iMac. It sits on my desk. It is wonderful. I love this thing to death. Nice big screen. Excuse me. Nice big screen. Able to edit, no problem. Color is wonderful on this thing. The brightness is great as well. But you can't take it with you to Alaska. Well, you can, but that would, oh my gosh, be such a hassle. Practically, you can't take it to Alaska. So, I don't have a laptop. What I do have is an iPad. I have an iPad mini number 2. Now, I understand that this is an older iPad, but since I've got the iMac, I've had no reason to upgrade yet, but that's what I brought, okay? And then I also bought a wireless hard drive so that I could import the cards, and then if I wanted to, I could edit the photos on the iPad. I was really excited about this idea. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that good for a lot of reasons, to tell you the truth. One, the iPad, maybe it's just the age of the iPad and that I haven't done it on like an iPad Pro or something like that, but it was incredibly slow within Lightroom Mobile, and it was fine. It's fine as an iPad, using it for whatever I want to use, documents, web browsing, playing some games and stuff. But once I opened up Lightroom, it was horrible experience. And what sucked the most is that you have to edit every single photo individually, and you can sync from one photo to the next, but you can't pick like 5 photos at a time and then sync them, like sync all the settings together there. So on top of the import process taking forever, the selection process taking even longer, then importing them into Lightroom, which crashed on me 3 times, which I don't know if it's an iPad problem or if it's a Lightroom problem during imports. So going through that whole process, and then it had to obviously create the smart preview so that you could look at the raw files on your iPad. By the time it loaded the smart previews, then I could apply my preset and then edit the photo individually. It took me, and I know that it took me 5 hours. 5 hours. What would normally take me tops 30 minutes on my computer. And now I understand that expecting it to be as fast as my computer isn't realistic. But to take 10 times longer than it would normally take on any computer really was horrible. My idea is that I was going to bring the iPad. I wasn't even going to do any editing. I thought, I'll just cull through the photos when I'm on the airplane on the flight home. This will be great. By the time I get home, all the photos will be culled through, and then I can import them into Lightroom. Done. That's going to save me a ton of time. But that was not the case at all, because it had to load every single preview in Lightroom, and it was a mess. So I don't know what the solution here is, because it's like, I don't want a laptop because I have an iMac. So essentially a laptop is only going to, okay. Yeah. So the point was, I could have just taken the photos, not brought an iPad, not brought a computer, and then that be that, right? I totally could have, but I'm worried. I would have worried myself sick about losing those photos, about missing a memory card, because I go through several memory cards on a day. If I would have lost one, that would have been, a third of the day, a quarter of the day. That would have been terrible to lose. So I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to back up the photos to an external hard drive, which I bought, and I'm not going to name the brand because it turned out to not be that great, because you needed to use the app in order for it to ingest the photos, which I thought defeated the purpose. But anyway, regardless. So that was my main point. The main point for me was not to edit photos on the flight and like to get the majority of my editing done. It was simply to have a backup of the wedding photos that I took. And even that was quite a hassle, to tell you the truth. So you can either bring a laptop and import all the photos at the wedding, right after the wedding, or you can take out the memory cards and hopefully your camera has dual card slots, and you can record on two different memory cards, and then take out at least one of them and then put it in an envelope and then ship it to your house, so that you have your photos in two different locations. If something happens, I don't know, while scanning, now this shouldn't happen, but if something happens, while scanning at the airport, or they have to check your luggage and your camera gets damaged or a memory card gets damaged, at least you'll have that backup in the mail on your way to the house. Because if you only have one copy, you have 0 copies. Okay, that was tip number 6. But legitimately, I like really want to be able to use an iPad as a workhorse, and I cannot wait until that day comes. So, okay, tip number 7. Don't work too hard. This whole time I've been talking about putting in the work, scout the locations, bringing all your gear, hammering out a timeline with addresses, making sure that you know exactly where the best light is, renting a car, getting everything set, and even like editing your photos on this tablet, right? I've been talking about putting in a ton of work. And number 7 is just don't work too hard. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the reasons why photographers, myself included, love the idea of shooting destination weddings is, for one, you typically love to travel. And if you love to travel, destination weddings seem like a great fit, right? You go to this new location, it's going to be wonderful, this place where you've never been before. But in reality, you show up the day before, you're kind of jet lagged, you shoot the wedding the day of, and then that next morning early, you're leaving because you got family at home that you got to take care of. You got no time to enjoy the city or wherever you are, this new location, on your own. And that sucks, right? That essentially defeats the purpose of shooting a destination wedding, except for just building your portfolio. So unless you take like 4 days away, which if you have a family, I just cannot imagine being able to do. I'd miss my kids so much. What I suggest that you do is that you take it easy. You do all the work beforehand. You scout the locations, you know exactly what you're going to pack and figure out how you're going to shoot based on Google mapping the locations of where the ceremony or the reception is, right? You can get an idea of the size, and that will give you a good idea of what sort of gear you need to bring. You figured out that timeline, you know exactly when everything's going to happen during the day. You got yourself a car. So when you get to this location, relax. Try to enjoy something about this place that you are going to remember for a long, long time, because that's kind of ultimately why you're doing this, right? You didn't get in, you don't want to shoot in these new locations just to show up, shoot, and then immediately leave. Otherwise, you would just shoot locally. Really, really, really try to enjoy your time as much as possible. And whether that's just going for a walk, if you got a hotel, going for a walk around your hotel, or going out for a beer once you arrive, or going downtown, doing like some sort of touristy thing, and not because it's just the thing to do, but it's just something to do, right? It's going to let you experience something new. And even if it's, even if you can't find the cool local spot that only the cool people know or whatever, and you do something touristy, you still got out and you didn't spend that time in your hotel room worrying about every little detail, because ultimately you can only do so much on a wedding day, and if you miss something, then you miss something, okay? And you just have to come to terms with that and just do your best. So that's it. That's my 7 tips. That's the 7 things that I learned while shooting a wedding in Alaska. So, I guess I should share with you how I didn't work too hard. Well, luckily I showed up a few days early, the 4 days early. So, the house that was rented was just like 3 miles or less from the Mendenhall Glacier, which was gorgeous. However, noticeably smaller since the last time I was there. It was kind of sad a little bit. But anyway, going out there, they have a hiking trail. We went out and walked to a waterfall called Nugget Falls, and that was gorgeous. We walked around a lake that was close by called Auk Lake, which apparently in native, Auk means lake. So I walked around Lake, and that was gorgeous as well. But it's just getting out and doing something that you kind of slow down. We also went downtown for a little bit, had some beers at a few local breweries. One of my favorite beers of all time is from the Alaskan Brewing Company, and it is a jalapeno IPA. And my aunt actually sent me 2 bottles several years ago, I believe 3 years ago or so. And so I went back with my hopes high that I was going to be able to get another bottle, but it was a very limited release series that they did, and therefore, no bueno. No more jalapeno IPAs for me. But the point was that I got to get out and I got to see this new brewery that I've never been to before, and kind of see how they did things. And it was very fun and exciting for me. And those are the things that I'm going to remember a lot of, on top of the wedding, obviously. So I'm really glad that I didn't just sit inside the house and think okay, well, what's going to happen if this happens? I got to prepare for this. I got to do that. Put in the work beforehand so that when you get there, you can enjoy yourself and your time, because ultimately that is what you're doing this for. Okay? Well, that's it. We're at the end of the 7 things that I learned while shooting a destination wedding in Alaska. If you have ever shot a destination wedding before, or had to travel for a wedding overnight, or had to take a plane or something, I would love to hear your experiences. If I left something out, I really want to know kind of how things best work for you. I would love that. Oh, you know what? I should add tip number 8. Have a fanny pack. Fanny packs are the best things in the world while traveling. And I don't care if anybody thinks that they look goofy. It is going to be the most practical thing that you've ever done for yourself. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay. So there you go. The 8 things I learned. So, if you want to get into kind of shooting more destination weddings, I'd love to talk more about this in the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group. So if you're not a part of it already, go ahead and join. Go to Facebook, your favorite social media site, and then just search for Beginner Photography Podcast, and you will see the group right there. You just answer 3 questions to get in. I'm the gatekeeper, and I will deny you if you don't answer those 3 questions. So that's it. All right. Until next time, I want you guys to get out there, and I want you guys to keep shooting and have fun and enjoy yourselves, because that is what photography is all about. Ultimately, though, I want you to be safe, because I love you all. Okay, that is it. I will see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. Be sure to join the conversations on Facebook and Instagram. And if you want any links or resources we talked about in today's episode, check out the show notes at beginnerphotographypodcast.com. See you again next week.